Okay.
How do you want to proceed, Mr. Chair? Do you want to
So,
walk through the,
yes.
so let me, good evening, everybody. It's nice to see everyone. So I want to go through Board of Aldermen. Item number 1 is gender neutrality. You approved that last week. Board of Alder number 2 is dealing with the Board of Education. And let me talk about this, if I may. And there's a couple of typos I noticed as we will fix before it goes out. I made a couple of changes here, but this kind of goes with the issue of the term of office, which is item number 4. So we'll talk about 2 items at the same time because they're related. When we were talking about this last week, I believe that we were setting up for the 4-year term to commence in 2025. And there would then be the member of the Board of Education running in 2025 would not run for a 4-year term, they would run for a 2-year term, and then run for would run for a 4-year term. The other alder would run for a 2-year term and then have to adjust so that the terms of office would be aligned fully in 2029. When I was drafting, and I apologize for doing this, but I think it may work out in a beneficial way because you actually get the 4-year alignment 2 years earlier, is if you hold off on the 4-year term for the alders and the mayor until the 2027 election and have a 2-year election for the member of the Board of Education in 2025, then in 2027, all of the local candidates would be aligned. So it creates the alignment 2 years earlier. And so the adjustment in the Board of Education section would reflect that. And then we'd have to make an adjustment in Board of Alder, item number 4 as well. I wanted to present it to you for your consideration to see whether that made any sense to you. If not, I'll go back to the language that we had suggested, we had talked about last week, where you have the alignment begins in 2025 with the next election cycle. And the Board of Alders, the Board of Education member would have to de-stagger, and then in 2029 you have a full complement. So the issue is whether you want a full complement running in 2027 or in 2029. So I just wanted to raise that. Not throw a curveball at you, but as I was drafting, I thought it was worthwhile to take that
Certainly was
into account.
curveball.
Just want to, you want to keep it, or you want to change it? That's the issue.
Questions from the commission?
No questions.
I mean, at this point, for me, it's the first time you've seen this language. I mean, I know we voted on one thing. We're about to do a submission for the Board of Alders. So I think that, this is just me speaking. I think for the board to really look at this and review it and bring it back, any recommendations that they have seems to be the most feasible thing. But oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah, because we're in our final deliberations, I'm really following Robert's Rules of Order and making sure so that we're not talking out of turn. So by putting it to 2027, it will eliminate us having to stagger the Board of Ed. And this seems like a more feasible option to align everything. I think that if we were to do it the way we had it previously and do half an election, reducing the number of the Board of Ed candidates to 2 years, I think we would run into a situation with the Board of Ed candidates, because it does state in our charter that they run for 4 years. And so we will be reducing them for 2 years. And I don't know if that's something that we would want to get into the weeds with the Board of Ed. it just seems feasible that we just wait it out for another term and all of us run 4 years together.
The BOE candidate in 2025 would be running for a 2-year term, so that in 2027, they would have a 4-year term.
Instead of doing 29.
Yeah, what this does is it creates the alignment for the citywide ticket in 2027 instead of 2029. What you give up is the mayoral 4-year term and the alder's 4-year term in 2025. But you end up with the full alignment, which is, I think, what you were aiming at. And that's why I hope you don't mind, as I was going through it, that was my thinking. Very easy for me to go and give you the language that you approved last week, but I just wanted to lay out this offer as an alternative.
These dates align it sooner.
Sooner, exactly, 2 years sooner. So you wouldn't have another election after 2027 until 2031.
Right.
Boy, I feel old when I say that, but that's the way it is.
And I think, Mr. Chair, when we were discussing it, this language was the original intent of what we were proposing. And we had just kind of, because we were all kind of talking and for some reason, even looking at it, when I read it earlier, it made sense. But then looking at the date again, the dates just confusing. The alders run on the odd year. And we come into office on the even year. And so that's what kind of was just throwing it off for me. So that when I saw the 2025, I said, okay, this makes sense, but then we were staggering it then, but this language makes more sense to me. And so I would be favorable to go with what we originally.
Language.
Yes, but 2027.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the changes. The one question I had, the charter is every 10 years. We go into 4 years, so the charter would fall in between when we have no election. So what happens to the charter? Does it go every 12 years now?
No, they can still do it. It doesn't have to be handled during an election year. It doesn't always work out that way.
Okay, I just.
And in some ways, in the middle of your term, it would be interesting to have a charter revision in the middle of the term. You'd want to have it in the municipal election year, or you might want to aim for state election year so that it's not a standalone. That's the issue you have to look at.
That's
You'd have to look at that. It would not be a huge problem, except be a cost to have it is it still the municipal election year, even if there's no election?
Right.
And it's entirely possible if you had a special election, it would fall in that municipal election year. It could be one person running that whole year. So it's possible a charter would be all by itself, or you might try to align the charter with the state election or the federal election. Normally, I don't recommend that because who's going to look at a charter when you're talking to candidates for president? But that's, yeah.
Thank you for that information. And as I said, I agree with the new language. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I'm correct, Councilor,
Yeah.
we have to do it no later than 10 years.
Yeah, you can do a charter revision every year if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do it at least every 10 years. So that if in 2 years you want to come, I have another municipality that is fixing their charter this year and not doing much at all with the structure of government, but they're setting up in their charter revision for a charter within the next 2 years to look at structural issues. Because the issue with their charter was so difficult that they wanted to fix it so everybody can understand what's in it. And once they find out what's in it, they're going to want to do something about it. And their objective is to actually try to come back within the next 2 years and fix the government as opposed to the document.
And we're mandated by state statute to look at it every 10 years, or how is that?
State statute allows you to call a charter revision commission whenever you want.
No, I mean,
The 10-year rule is local. It's something
Okay.
that municipalities started adopting, and I recommend it to most of my communities. Some of my communities are going for shorter periods now. I have one that's going for 5 years. I think it's a little, you don't want to change your charter that often, but you do want to try to fix it when you can. So I think the 10-year rule is a good rule.
And so if there was a concern about 10 being in the middle of the election, we can certainly change it to 8 years.
It's 9 years, 8 years, whatever you want. There's no magic to the 10-year rule.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Do you want to take a vote on that at this moment, or do you want to wait till we're done? All right.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I will call all in favor of the language as amended. Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? The ayes have it. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. So that was for our secretary, that was.
Items 2 and 4.
Yeah, I should have said it. Yeah, BOA item number 2 and item number 4. Everyone confident on what we voted on?
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies for not saying what we were amending.
BOA on number 3 doesn't have any changes. That's the compensation. If everybody's okay with that, we will just jump over it. Then BOA number 4, we just acted on. BOA number 5, I found a typo, which I don't need to vote on. I'll just let you know. The word "of" was missing in the first paragraph at the top of the page. But there were no changes in that section.
Councilor, Mr. Chair, sir. Just because someone had spoke to me earlier about the transparency of our committee, can we just ask again, Mr. Chair, if everyone is okay with number 3, and just have a verbal response for that as we're moving on? We don't have to vote on it, but I guess we should have a consensus that everyone is okay with the compensation of the Board of Alders as we're moving on.
Fine.
I will ask that question as I go through.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought.
We have the masks on and sometimes you can't tell people are saying something.
I don't know what I'm saying and I could barely breathe, so that's all right. We'll get through it. The item number, number 5, number 6. So number 5, let's do number 5. If everybody's okay with number 5. That is the issue of the alders not having to be bipartisan. So it's the issue of whether or not there should be, we should continue with the status quo. The commission has voted to change the status quo so that you can have 2 members of the same party serving on boards and commissions, including the 2 that are specified here because they're the only 2 in the charter, and all the boards and commissions that are created by the alders by ordinance. So if everybody wants to, everybody's okay with that, we'll just move on to the next one, or was?
I think I voted no on that one,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? And it's, the name is no.
If it's okay, Mr. Chair, let's, can we take another vote on that?
Sure. Okay.
Or is there, well, perhaps, since we're in discussion, yes,
So discussion on,
let's move the item.
okay. All right. Second?
Second.
Okay.
Is,
I recommend discussion,
no, you're just a no vote.
right?
Okay. So there was some concern about the language of this. The board is comprised of only one member, only members of one political party representing the 4 million. I'm not sure if the vote is no on everything or just on a certain section. Article or section 2A or section 4C, or you're voting no on the whole BOA number 5.
I thought it was just the entire section. If I was in a disagreement on one side, I mean, I didn't know it was 3 votes, it was one
Well,
vote.
no, it's one vote. I'm just trying to see if we can focus in, because if we can change some language, then maybe that would be more amicable to have a a better consensus of where we're going. But if you're knowing on the whole thing, I'm just trying to develop some discussion on what your thought process is so that it can be out in the open.
I mean, I guess the question is, must we have it, I mean, you have a majority. Do we have to have a unanimous vote?
No, we don't. I was just trying to provide space for discussion because we are in a public deliberation. And so, okay, if there's no other discussion, then I guess that's fine.
Okay, so then everybody,
Well,
So all in favor?
aye.
Opposed?
Two no votes.
Okay, so you reaffirmed item number 5. Yes. Item number 6, I have a couple of comments that I wanted to make, and this is really based, I think I'm most surprised the Corporation Council didn't testify to this issue. The Corp Council has requested and has raised a number of issues over the course of the last several weeks and came up with some alternate language that I wanted to present to you, which I am. Right now you have a definition of contracts. We've created a definition of contracts to be expansive enough to include MOUs, MOAs, letters of agreement, all types of consensual agreements. One of the things I'm proposing here, this is based on a number of discussions that I was having over the course of the last few days, and actually the last few years, representing this body on a number, representing the Board of Alders on a number of matters, is to make it clear that any consensual agreement, and that's what the new language is. If you take a look at the proposed alternate, I've added new language that says that it's the intent of this provision to include any written agreement documenting consensual settlements of any claims or allegations involving the city and any third parties, whether originating in a judicial or administrative proceeding under law, this charter or ordinance, or pursuant to, or otherwise related to the rights derived from any agreement, including collective bargaining agreements. The objective is to make it clear that this is an all-inclusive definition and that it includes settlements that are made in some form of judicial or administrative process. That's change number 1, which is independent. I ask that you think about adding that language. The second issue is the issue that was really raised by the administration. Currently, what we've done is we've established a disclosure requirement. And the disclosure requirement is paragraph number 4 under the approved items on the first page of item number 6. And I think that the administration has raised a question. We already have a disclosure ordinance. The disclosure ordinance, which I drafted for the board and approved, is a pretty comprehensive ordinance. The administration has proposed an alternate approach to this. I think the intent of the alders, and I won't speak to the alders who are here, was really to try to make sure that contracts that have to come before the board actually do come before the board. And the administration proposed language that is actually interesting because it reflects the power that you have, but not a power that's expressed directly in your charter. And so in lieu of the disclosure language, the administration has proposed, and I'll ask the Port Council to correct me if I'm wrong, has requested that language be placed in the charter that requires the mayor to seek approval of the Board of Alders for any contract. Remember, contract's an expanded term, capital C, creating a present or future obligation longer than 12 months in duration. The significance of the 12 months in duration is any of the alders who have listened to me over the years know that multi-year contracts are solely within the province of the legislative body as the fiscal body of the city. And so that's what that captures. not expressed anywhere else in the charter. So to have that expression of law in the charter, I think is a very affirmative thing. 12 months in duration or payment in excess of the amount, the authorized limit established by ordinance. You currently have an ordinance that establishes the limit at $100,000. You can lower that, you can raise that, you can do whatever you want with that limit. Obviously, the mayor can veto anything that you try to do, but at the present time, there is an authorized limit of $100,000. And that the board is obviously authorized to adopt such ordinances as are necessary to effectuate this provision in accordance with the authorities set forth in Article 4 of this charter, including but not limited to the specific section that's referenced. That language is significant because that language gives you your justification for your disclosure ordinance. So while you're not creating a disclosure requirement in the charter, you are getting into the charter a direct ability to approve contracts that I believe you have already, but it articulates it, I think, in a way that's very productive and very useful. So my recommendation in the, from my perspective, I don't want to tell you to walk away from something that you really care about. If you think that disclosure provision is the be all and end all, I'm not going to try to persuade you otherwise. That's a judgment you need to make. I think that the alternative that the administration has raised is a reasonable alternative, and I just wanted to present that to you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. And the Corporation Counsel is here, I think, so if she has anything she wants to add.
Mr. Vice Chair?
May I yield, Mr. Chair, to Commissioner Syndrome?
Yeah. I'm just trying to get clarity in terms of what we agreed to make changes to last time. We now have another section 2B6, is that?
It's a replacement.
Okay, so.
So in lieu of the disclosure requirement, the administration has indicated that they think it's burdensome, and they also think it's not clear. It talks about providing prior to execution. Well, they're supposed to provide contracts to you.
Right.
And what the new B6 does, it says you need to give us the contracts. We have the expanded term of the contract, and if the objective is to get those contracts into the Board of Alders, I think that the new language does it. But it's your call, and it's language that you approved. The administration, the Court Counsel did call on me to take a look at it, and I thought they came up with a reasonable alternative. And whether you agree is up to you, not up to me, but I just wanted to raise that with you.
Yes, Commissioner Keith.
Steve, what it does is 2B6 had all contracts that have fiscal impact on the city. So that would mean a contract for $10 would have to go to the Board of Aldermen, right?
That's correct.
So what this does is this goes back to the ordinances to require what is now in the ordinances.
Correct. If they want to lower it, they can lower it to 50, but they're not going to lower it to 10 or 100 or something like that. So the alders have the control mechanism, obviously over mayoral veto. If the mayor doesn't like what they're doing, but they have the control for controlling the authorized limit.
So it doesn't mandate a charter level of everything.
That's right.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Mr. Chair, if we can just take 30 seconds and just read it a few more times.
Be my guest.
And then I'll have a comment.
And I apologize for doing this, but I thought the argument that the administration made was worth the commissioner hearing.
And this does capture, especially for the commissioners to hear, this does capture the intent of what we were looking for. We don't want to see every fiscal impact, $10, $100. We did have a dollar amount and a length of time that we wanted to make sure it got into the charter, because ordinances can be amended or changed depending on the board. But I think that it is important that a certain dollar amount come before the Board of Alders for approval, because the alders are the fiscal agents of the city. But as Councilor stated, it doesn't mean that we want to see $1,000 contracts, because we would absolutely be inundated with purchasing and all these other things that they, oh my goodness, it's a nightmare.
And the way this works also, keep in mind, it's an or. So if it's a multi-year agreement and it's not $100,000, it comes to you.
Right.
If it's a $50,000 multi-year agreement, you're gonna see it, because the mayor does not have the authority to enter into multi-year agreements. Only the alders can approve multi-year agreements. So it's an or situation. So you may see contracts for less than $100,000.
And we do have established by ordinance currently $100,000. Anything that is $100,000 must come before the Board of Aldermen for approval in contract form. So in reading this and hearing the explanation from Judge Commissioner Keys, I would be in favor of this language over the previous language, which would bring every piece of paper in front of us for a vote. Let's see, so for BOA number 6, the proposed alternate, I move this language as proposed. Is there any discussion?
I just need clarification. So not everything comes to, is there just a minimum? Like, is the minimum 100,000? Or, I guess I want to know how it would actually operate, like, example.
Certainly, so
$50,000 contract comes to the mayor's office. Do they have to bring it to Board of Alders, yes or no?
not a contract. And
Well,
if
the
it
contract
was-
has been expanded to mean just about everything.
Right, so the only way that would come before so the mayor has discretion to, it'd be better if I let the council.
Yeah, you said 80,000?
I said
50,000.
50.
Was that?
50.
Yeah, so it's a $50,000 contract. It wouldn't come to the Board of Alders under the current rule. It wouldn't come to them under the proposed charter provision unless it was to be paid over multiple years. So if it's $50,000 in 1 year, the alders control the purse. They approve a line item budget. The mayor has the ability to spend the money and to execute the laws faithfully and spend that money appropriately. And if the mayor enters into contracts that are 1 year or less, and the money is in the budget, that doesn't have to go to the Board of Alders. That's not a legislative function, it's an administrative function. The judgment here is that there's an amount where the threshold crosses that the alders want to start looking at those amounts, and there's the multi-year element. And so they would not look at the $50,000 contract standing on its own.
110.
110 would go before the Board of Alders, yes, whether it's a multi-year or not.
Or $100,001 for us. So the multi-year, for just another example, is if the city wanted to enter into a 1-year contract with Xerox for a copy machine, and it was $50,000, they wouldn't have to come to us for that reason. They would only come to us if it was a multi-year contract
With zero.
with Xerox.
Most Xerox contracts are going to be multi-year.
Or if it was a service contract for 1 year.
Yeah.
And it was under $100,000, they wouldn't have to come to us. They would just be, the administration would be able to do that. And that's not something that we would want, because the mayor has discretion to budget the city and to take care of the needs and to buy supplies and things that the city needs. And so he has that discretion to do that. And I should mention also that contracts are different than grants and other things that would come before us, money coming in. That will eventually be spent, that will come before us, regardless of the dollar amount.
And the alders, with their discretion, their authority already, like pure legislative authority, although I think it will be made even clearer with the second portion of this proposal, has the ability to have the disclosure ordinance, which they have right now. They have it without a charter provision, they have it. And one of the things that they might think about, I'd have to look at it again, I haven't looked at this disclosure ordinance for a little bit. But one of the things that you might think about putting in the disclosure ordinance is to make sure that you want to make sure that regardless of the price, that option agreements are disclosed. Extension agreements are also exposed in that, because those are multi-year contracts. If you enter, I've seen this in city government, not necessarily with mayors, I've seen it with independent bodies that think of themselves as their own government within the city government or being the department, that actually tries to pull that off and doesn't disclose to the Board of Alders, to the legislative body, an option agreement. Oh, it's a one-year contract. No, you have an option to extend. That's not a one-year contract. So the way you deal with those would be through your disclosure ordinance.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor as this language as proposed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? The ayes have it for BOA number 6. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members. Item number 7, BOA number 7, just ask you to reaffirm your understanding and support of the current effort to trend away from the current permanent members of the Parks Commission. To approve a Parks Commission to move forward where as the members leave the Park Commission, the seat would convert into a 3-year term. The Board of Alders would have to establish an ordinance to create the term for that party, which could be a partial term depending on where it falls. But this is basically the devolution of the permanent members of the Park Commission. So unless there's an attempt to amend it, I just want to affirm that provision. Same is true of BOA number 8. We probably will return to discuss this section of the charter in a few moments when we talk about departments and boards and commissions. But this is the current sunset provisions in Article 15 of the charter. We're simply reaffirming them to make sure that they get taken care of at some point. If the alders were to adopt an ordinance next week, next month, in September, in October, these provisions will come out of the charter even before election day. This is the disappearing section of the charter, and it simply reaffirms that I want to make sure the dates were accurate to 2023 as opposed to 2013. That's all that does. And I threw back in here some of the procurement. I mentioned this last week. Some of the exemptions that I think have value in the charter. And so that's what BOA number 8 is. If everybody's okay with that.
This is the infamous Article 15.
The infamous Article 15.
Yes, sir.
The Houdini chapter, the Houdini, I hope. We want it to be the Houdini provision. Okay, BOA number 9 simply expands the time for which the Board of Alders acts from 60 days to 90 days. I assume everybody's okay with BOA number 9? Yeah. BOA number 10, residency. I had no action here, but I don't know, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, if there's any alternate approach that the Commission wants to take this evening.
Vice Chair?
Mr. Chair, this continues to be quite a heavy lift, and I would be in favor of taking no action and sending it to the full Board of Alders and allowing them to have further discussion with the administration, and then sending it back to this commission for, if necessary, for further deliberation.
May I explain, if I may, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, because I think you were looking for flex on that. I know you were, Madam Commissioner. But let me explain where we are in the process. It's very useful because we're going to discuss boards and commissions and departments in a few moments. And since it was just raised here, so you're going to be hopefully reporting this out this evening. You now have a document. It's not a red line. Most of the red lines are in here. I will try to, I've been having a problem creating a red line for whatever reasons. We'll make that work. We'll be transmitting this document to the Board of Alders for the 15th, the next week. You are going to be in hiatus, kind of. When this goes to the Board of Alders, there will be a committal meeting at at some point, we'll talk to the president, the leadership about setting up that committee meeting. The chair, the vice chair, the secretary, and all of you, if you want, should be part of that meeting. You'll be sitting, wherever the alders are going to let you sit when you talk to them about this presentation. In this presentation, it might be in one of the other rooms where everybody's sitting around the table. It might be a committee of the whole. I think that's how we did it. I'll rely on Al, who's here, 10 years ago. And you'll discuss it. You'll go through exactly what we're doing here tonight, kind of discussing each item as you go through it. They'll raise questions. They'll learn about what you've done, etc. Their function at that point is one of two functions. They can either approve it, accept it as a final report, just as it is, and it's a final report and it's approved. They can reject parts of it as well. No, they can't reject parts of it. They approve it, it's a final report, and they've approved it in whole. The more likely scenario is that they are going to look at it and say, we have some recommendations. And what the majority leader proposed just now is a good example of one of the things that will be done. You've not been able to finalize that section. The alders are concerned about residency. The mayor's concerned about residency. There's alders who are concerned about residency. It's not been resolved here. So you're going to send it back to the Board of Alders and ask them for the recommendation back to you. That's a perfectly appropriate exercise during a charter revision. We're probably going to do the same. Should I jump just for a second we're probably going to be doing the same thing in the departments and boards and commissions this evening. The issues come up. It's not a snap your fingers kind of judgment. We brought up in the last 2 or 3 weeks, in fairness. It's an issue I've cared about for many, many years, so I'd love to be involved in helping out on that. But I think that we want the guidance of them to say, yeah, these are the departments, and these are the boards, these are the commissions that you should be looking at, and we'll work on language, working with the two bodies. Because I work very hard to establish a rapport between a commission. People think commissions are independent, and you are, but you also need to recognize, like I told you at our very first meeting, who votes for your package. In the end, it has to get through the Board of Alders. And so I think it's really important that the board learns from what you've done in the field and that you learn from what they're trying to accomplish. And so this is an area where we are going to be asking for the recommendation. And since you're sharing counsel, we will draft language with the assistance of the chair and other leadership of this body, members of this body. It's not such a big body that we're not going to talk to everybody here, and try to come up with language that will work for both bodies to achieve those goals. So I just want to explain that. Then it comes back to you, maybe a meeting, maybe 2 meetings, sometime in July. You'll come back as a group and you will finalize everything. You'll look at their recommendations. It's not a huge package that we have here. You'll look at the recommendations, and there may be a few adjustments here and there. And then you'll send it back to them with a final report. That'll be your final report as opposed to what we call a draft report right now. And they then can approve it in whole or part, reject it in whole or part. The hope and objective that I have for my commissions and my legislative bodies is that they will accept it in whole and that we'll get there. So I just want to explain that process, and then by sometime in July or early August, the alders will vote on the questions, hopefully approve it, and it'll be on the ballot in November. So I just want to explain that what the majority leader was recommending is well within the range of the things you do in a charter revision. Okay, residency issue. The next issue was traffic authority. I think the position is no need for action. The state statute, there's nothing in the charter about traffic authority. If the state statute passes and the alders and the mayor want to create a traffic authority, they'll be able to do it without regard to any language in the charter. So that's the approach you've taken on that. Everybody's all right with that? The next one is Board of Health. We've deleted the language we retained. The Doctor of Medicine standard from an accredited school of medicine, but have deleted all the language, the recommendation of the health director on the years of experience and the areas of expertise, clinical medicine, public health administration, teaching, etc. So we've left those things out. So that's, I know we had the testimony, the public testimony this evening, but that's where that stands. Is Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. And now we get to the two items. Unless, Madam Secretary, am I missing anything? Or okay, so the last two items that I have on the list are transfer of departments to the Code of Ordinances and the transfer of boards and commissions to the Code of Ordinances. And if I may, Mr. Chair, just for 1 minute, indulge me. I have some thoughts on boards and commissions. My thoughts are not as clear on the departments because I really think, and I've talked to the majority leader about this. I've probably talked to you about it, Mr. Chair. I've talked to others about this as well. Departments are a little more difficult, but I still think things can be done. I think there's time and room for the alders to look at this. If you give them a recommendation, asking them to look at this issue of moving boards and commissions and certain departments from the charter to the Code of Ordinances. As you know, I've said this many, many times, and anyone's heard me at any charter lectures, I really believe that alders and mayors, legislators, and mayors, council members and mayors, and first select people should be creating a government that is contemporaneous and that works in the times in which they are serving. Not without guardrails, not without limit. You have a charter that will require that you do certain things, that you provide certain services, but you don't have to do it in a form of government that was established when Dwight D. Eisenhower was president of the United States, or even Jimmy Carter, for that matter, in the 1970s. And so I'm a devout believer in moving things out of the charter into the Code of Ordinances. And so I think that the alders will have a shot in that time frame, that we will work. And again, I think using all of the talent on this commission during that period of time informally to move it in that direction. But just to give you some of my thinking that I will be advising them, as I would advise you, is I think there are certain boards that have to be in the charter. The Board of Education has to be in the charter. I believe a Board of Ethics has to be in the charter. You don't want to put a Board of Ethics in a place where politicians, not the current Board of Alders, not the current mayor, but some future mayor or future Board of Alders gets rid of a Board of Ethics. Civil service needs to be in the charter. You don't want to mess with the civil services, cumbersome as the Corporation Council has indicated that could be. You don't want to eliminate that from your charter. City planning should be in the charter. BZA should be in the charter because they're special act based entities, and where we operate as a special act community when it comes to those types of matters. The boards and commissions that are in the charter that I think can be moved to the Code of Ordinances without undermining them at all would be the Finance Review and Audit Commission, which is our old Board of Finance. May he rest in peace, Leon Nebudow, our Jack and my dear friend and mentor. I was a longtime chair of that, so I hope Leon will not hold this against us. The Board of Police Commissioners, the Board of Fire Commissioners, the Board of Park Commissioners, the Board of Public Health, the Board of Library Directors, and Civilian Review Board can all be sent over to the Code of Ordinances. You mandate that they exist. So I'm not saying you eliminate their names from the charter, but you allow the alders to create them, and particularly in the case of the Civilian Review Board, and we went through a tortured process, Mr. Chairman, as you may remember, creating it 10 years ago before there was enabling legislation. Just to remind everybody of what we went through. You now have enabling legislation, very broad, subpoena authority, whole range of things. It's a wonderful opportunity for the board to look at this and try to create this CRB in the modern sense, as Hartford has and other communities have, to move forward. So my recommendation would ultimately be that those be named but not created in the charter. And what we do is we keep them all in Article 15, the Houdini chapter, and as soon as they are adopted, one by one, those chapters fall away. And I think I require an opinion of the Corporation Council to make sure that all the charter mandates are met, and that any obligations are met that are named in the charter, particularly on the department side. You want to make sure that you're not eliminating functions. That's what you want to have in your charter, services and functions of the city. And so as you move your departments, I put the burden on, the Corporation Council as chief legal officer of the city to, along with the Board of Alders, make an opinion that this has been done, it's done, now it's out of the charter, and that's the direction. So I wanted to give you my 2 cents on the boards and commissions. I have no advice on the departments, except there are some core departments you leave personnel, civil service personnel, controller, finance function. Those things, corporation counsel should be in the charter. There are a number of things that should be there, but a lot of your service departments do not need to be in the charter. So, with that,
And public safety.
public safety, yeah, oh yeah. Absolutely.
Commissioner,
I just have a quick question. Is this the complete list of recommendations that are in the charter currently that you'd like to, or that you're recommending that be sunset?
What I'm recommending is that we ask the alders to take a look at these 2 chapters, chapter Article 6 and Article 7, and that they move them toward a sunset and come to us with language. And hopefully, we have 2 members who are on the Board of Alders. We'll be talking to all of you during this process. And so there won't be any surprises. Everybody will know the direction everybody's taking. And the objective is to move as many of these entities into the sunset provisions so that we can thin the charter down and make it more of a constitution as opposed to a policy manual.
I'm sorry, Mr. Keys, yes, sir.
Just quickly, Steve, I quick ending remarks for me. I think that we hope we do come up with a compromise on residency that's workable. And I think it's a great idea to send this to the Board of Aldermen to consider, but we got to be awful careful about taking pins out of hand grenades. We may be biting off too much, biting off more than we can chew by doing all this all at once, and kind of just a little skeptical on eliminating, moving all that stuff all at once.
I raised that issue. That's why we're doing it, kind of moving in the direction we're taking. And I think the alders will figure out what the level is as we go toward it. Yeah, and I think that my recommendation is that they'll be talking to the administration. The administration should definitely weigh in on how the wheels of government have to move. And so I share your concern.
How many days do we have? 45?
You have up to 60 days. You're probably not going to use them, but you have up to 60 days. So, we have a good solid 30 days. But we're going to have to sit, it's going to be a hard job. I think the board of commissions are easier. I think it's the departments that are going to be the challenge between you and me. I think the departments concern me more along the lines that Commissioner Keys was just talking about with the boards and commissions. I don't think you do a lot of harm by moving the boards and commissions. The departments we need to be careful about. But you raised the point, Mr. Majority Leader, that we don't have a public works department, and our charter has a public works department. So at the very least, you're probably going to address a reverse engineering job of trying to make the charter look like the government looks today. So I think at the very least, you're going to want to look at things like that.
And I agree. I certainly don't want to. We have to do it right and make sure, because this is probably the most important document our city has. And so it's not my intent to rush through it and to just yank things out because to make it slimmer, we want to do it right. But I am very concerned that we are out of alignment in some of our job titles. And so if that's what we can correct, and the only thing that we can correct as far as departments, then I think that we must do that. And whether that was done correctly or not, it was done through the budget. We're looking at some things now, and I've asked the administration to make sure that when we're changing titles, it doesn't impact any title that's currently in our charter, so that we don't end up in this position again where we make changes to titles and departments and they're not aligned with our charter.
Well, one of the things we'll look at is, remember in Article 15, we have all those job descriptions, right? That we didn't act on in the last 10 years. We should look at those, because some of those jobs may be the titles that are being changed. And so those are right for it, because those are moving out. And so we should, so, you know, if we are moving those descriptions out, we may not put a title in. We may say the department head shall be responsible for the management of these functions and not name the department head. That's an easy way of getting through that. The department head, you know, we know the job description is being sent to the code of ordinances. So an interim step may be to take the titles out and have the functions laid out in the charter without getting too radical to Commissioner Key's position of finding a middle ground where you can have some flexibility. We already have the flexibility in the charter of reorganizing our departments as long as the functions of those departments are kept. So even the situation with the Public Works Department, and I don't know the particulars, so I'm not going to tell you that I know that everything that the Public Works Department is supposed to be doing is being done in the new combined entity. But we did create that provision 10 years ago. And I've done that in a lot of charters. But again, I think it required an opinion. I don't remember whether it does or not. But that can be done already. So we should look at it because there are alignments that have taken place and the charter shouldn't be inconsistent. If we know that this is the way it is, then we should modify it. And that's not doing damage. That's just reverse engineering and correcting it to reflect the world we live in today. That's all.
Mr. Chair, I love this. I don't know what the rest of the commissioner is, but I absolutely love this. And I am seriously considering law school. I am.
Big mistake.
I thought you were a real smart guy.
I just love this.
Really?
So, yeah,
Well,
this is-
Keith and I will talk to you.
No, Become a fireman.
Medical school maybe, sir.
Fireman.
Fire under policeman. Yeah. All right, that's it for me. So you need to act on those two.
So our action on this, Mr. Chair, would be to recommend this to the board and commissions in the charter. Okay, yep, is there a motion for the boards and commissions in the charter for consideration to move to the code of ordinances? Is there a motion? Will somebody move it? Yep. Okay, can we have a second?
And this is to transmit, right?
To send this as a recommendation to the board of alders. Any discussion on this, further discussion?
I'm sorry, in terms of clarity on BOA number 10, which this is included in, correct?
Yeah.
Well, it's a separate item. It's on the
They're
same
separate
page.
items, but they're
It's
all
on the same
under the
page,
same
yeah.
thing. We are moving the residency issue with no action. We are, the no need for action on the traffic authority. For the Board of Health section, we have agreed to eliminate that additional language that talked about 5 years experience in clinical medicine, et cetera. Article 6 and 7 relates to the boards and commissions.
In the departments. Yep,
Clear.
you got it.
Any further discussion? Does everyone know what we're talking about? You're all set? Okay. It's hard with the math to know where the people are. Okay, all in favor of recommending this to the Board of Alders, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, motion passes. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
And then I think, Steve, you know, you make me look like a clone here, because I had a written statement for the process. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. That's okay, that's okay. So I'm just gonna add to that, in the event,
Sorry.
that's okay. If the board, decides to adapt the changes, it has to be published, and sent to the ballot. And then it goes to the ballot and receiving approval of the majority of the vote cast in the special election of the majority by 15% of the total votes. The charter is approved and goes in effect, passage within 30 days, otherwise specified. So
The one correction I'll make is the 15% requirement doesn't apply if you're in a municipal general election. So if you win 2-1, 2 people vote for it, 1 against it, charter passes. If it's standing in its own referendum, the 15% rule applies.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from the commission?
No.
Okay, and I would just add too, any meeting or any requests from the Board of Alders, all commissioners will be informed and certainly invited. Not for you guys to be there, so I don't think it's just.
So on Monday, we're going to deliver this document to the city and town clerk. We'll find out who he is and make sure he gets the document, and I'll make sure that he personally stamps it for me. We'll try to do it before noon, because I think it can go on as communication, if I'm correct, at the Board of Alders that evening, if it's before noon, which is nice to be able to get it in there, and that's where the clock starts ticking on the 60 days. 45 days, but within 45 days, they have to have a public hearing, in which 15 days after the public hearing, they get to act on the charter. I think we're going to try to move it as quickly as we can, but that's when the clock starts ticking next month. And I'll have prepared for the chair a draft transmittal letter that he will send to himself as the city town clerk.
Well, I thought it would be appropriate to thank everyone, but we're not finished yet, Mr. Chair. So we have another few sessions to go.
And you'll see each other informally while it's at the Board of Alders.
But I do want to thank our attorney for the work that he's done. And he's done the heavy lifting. And there is still some work to be done, but I want to thank him for being in all of our meetings and leading us through this process. This is my first charter revision, so I'm really excited to be on the board, on this commission, and serving with you so far. So thank you, attorney.
Thank you. And I just want to say that I've worked with Michael Smart now about 2 charter revisions. I have very few recidivist chairs in my career and he's well deserving to be a recidivist. I thank him because he's one of my favorite people in the world. He's a great guy. He shepherded the big project 10 years ago, and through difficult times this year, has been a great chairman and just a good friend. So I'm honored to be working with him and all of you. Jack Keys and I were little boys when we got involved in this business many years ago.
I
So it's
said
good.
little.
Yeah, me too, Jack. So, young boys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
No, you won't.
So, stand to the left, everyone.